Good morning, everyone. I'm Jennifer Denson, PEP's Executive Director, and I welcome you all and Happy New Year. This is a great year for PEP. We are celebrating 25 years. It's our 25th anniversary. It's hard to believe that we were started in 2000, and certainly the environmental stewardship and economic development has changed dramatically in these 25 years, and PEP is continuing to grow with it. You'll hear more about this in our newsletter and throughout the year, culminating in late September with our annual meeting and awards program. So just keep an eye out on that. I'm not going to make any other announcements because you can read about them on the website in our newsletter. I'm going to move straight into thanking our sponsor, McFadden Engineering. McFadden Engineering has been a member with PEP since 2010, and we appreciate their support, and so I'll introduce their owner, Frank McFadden, to come up and say a word or two.
Thank you, Jennifer, and good morning, everyone. Good crowd here, so thank you all for coming. I won't say a whole lot because we want Justin to have time to really get into this topic we're all interested in. We've been in business 37 years. We're in our 37th year, and incorporated on 8/8 of '88. Some of you are old enough here. Where's Neil? I know he is. And myself, Robert. There was some prophets saying that day the world was coming to an end. So I woke up on 8/8 of '88, and well, we're still here, so I might as well incorporate a company. Got to have something to do. So that's how long we've been around. And we're civil environmental. Most of you, a lot of you know us, and probably 80–90% environmental. Industrial wastewater has become a big sector for us, and with our new product, patented wastewater product, OxyShark, that we have had out there for about 6 or 7 years, is now getting into the large industrial sector, food processing, and other of those industrial processes that require a little more horsepower. And so PEP was very instrumental in Jennifer's help when we first kicked that off. You know, you guys awarded one of those sustainability awards, forgot exactly what you call it, but those kind of things help. So it's very, very useful, and helped us kind of launch that and stand that company up. I'm not going to say any more about that. There's brochures out there on the in the hallway out there. I want to take just one more minute or 30 seconds, put on my other hat. As you know, the ADEM director, Lance LaFleur, is retiring in May. If you didn't know that, it will be public notice come out for the job, for his job description and for the replacement. So we at the commission have to find another one. It's hard to find another one like him. If any of you, I know most of you probably have dealt with him, or some of your people have. He was there 15 years. And, he never got arrested and handcuffed, and, that's a good thing. That's not been the case with all of them, I guess, but he's done a great job. He's going to be hard to replace. So I told him I was going to do this today because with this austere group here, maybe someone would like to move to Montgomery and take that position. We will be filling it in the next 3 months, so until March 14th. If you have any interest, just submit a resume or application. So thank you again, Jennifer and board.
Thank you, Frank and McFadden Engineering, for your long time membership and sponsoring today. And as Frank alluded to, they have a booth out there in the hallway. So as you leave, please take a minute and share your appreciation and maybe get to know them a little bit better. So we appreciate them being a partner of our organization. At this time, I'd like to introduce our speakers. We've got a couple of speakers with us today, and I'll first introduce Justin McDonald, who currently serves as the Acting Deputy District Engineer for Programs and Project Management at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Mobile District. He oversees highly skilled teams of professionals in the planning, engineering, design, and construction of complex, multi-million-dollar water resource and national defense-related projects across the region. He has over 22 years of experience in the areas of civil, coastal, hydraulic, hydrologic engineering, as well as dredging, project management, and construction contract management. So Justin, we thank you for being with us this morning. We also have, who's no stranger to PEP, the director of the National Estuary Program for Mobile Bay, Roberta Swann, who's been the executive director there for a while, and she guides and manages over 300 community leaders in undertaking restoration, capacity building, and policy-related initiatives to improve and protect Alabama's coastal resources. So it ought to be obvious, but the reason they're both here today is they work together. We have stakeholders that work with the Army Corps of Engineers on the beneficial reuse, and we're looking forward to, if you've heard a lot in the media lately, we're looking forward to some myth busting this morning. So without further delay, Justin, Roberta, you guys want to start? Okay. Thank you. Let's welcome them.
Good morning, everybody. Before I get started, I just want to let you know, so I can get this off my plate, we just produced a newsletter. We do this twice a year with the state of Alabama, and in this newsletter there are several copies out front, and it talks in more depth about some of the projects that we're going to talk about today and how we're managing projects along the Alabama coast. Jennifer's taking pictures. I can't advance, so Jennifer's going to be my +1, I guess. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. A little bit about the NEP, shoreline management, our intergovernmental task force or working group that we have established for quite some time now, and what all we are doing to manage sediment along the Alabama coast. Go ahead. First, I'd like to give you a little bit of background about the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program. How many people in this room know who we are, what we do? So maybe about half of you. And most of those people probably work with us. So basically, the National Estuary Program was created through amendments to the Clean Water Act in 1987. And our charge was to be a counterpart to the regulatory authority of the EPA, where EPA regulates, gives out NPDES permits and whatnot. We are actually charged with coming into estuaries of national significance, which we became one in 1995, and we are to bring together all of the different community and economic interests that have an interest in protecting our coastal way of life and protecting our environmental resources. I think we all learned firsthand after the BP oil spill that the environment is the economy in coastal Alabama, and our charge as the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program in convening this management conference, which it took me a little while when I first started this job to figure out what a management conference was. It really is a collective impact model for environmental protection, or for, frankly, continuously improving environmental protection along the Alabama coast. You have to kind of hit it again, yeah. So the clean water is focused on protecting the chemical and biological integrity of the nation's waters for fish, wildlife, but also for recreation use on the water. And I don't think a lot of people think about the Clean Water Act in recreation, but it brings in that human component within that act. Go ahead. So the management conference is focused on our two coastal counties, Mobile and Baldwin County. But the watershed, the water that drains into Mobile Bay, comes from 3/4 of the state of Alabama and portions of Tennessee, Georgia, and Mississippi. So you may be sitting there asking yourself, well, what can you do on the coast that's going to affect all that other water that's coming through the rest of the watershed? What we can do is we can establish best practices. We can push the envelope on how we manage our coastal resources here. We can demonstrate successes here that we can then communicate, promote, recruit more partners up the state. And that's really where we're at right now in the continuum of the National Estuary Program. Our management conference is organized by constituent committees. We bring all of our elected officials together, our business community together, our project managers or resource managers together, our community groups together. And each one of those committees that you, whoops, sorry. Where are you going? Each one of those committees that you see in that circle have co-chairs that elevate up to an executive committee, and that's where the sauce is made. Those co-chairs that are on the executive committee, along with other key constituents like the Port, the Corps of Engineers, county commissioners, all of those come together and talk about like what is the path that we're going to chart forward and how do we make this happen? How do we secure the resources to make it happen, frankly? And these committees meet on a quarterly basis, and then every 5 years they meet in a setting like this. This is what the management conference looks like in action. These are not people that are just names on paper. They literally come to quarterly meetings. So you figure 7 meetings every quarter, plus every 5 years, we have a big meeting, which we just had, where we literally mine people's brains for, okay, you've been learning about you set out a plan, we've implemented the plan, you've been tracking the progress of this plan, where do we go now? And that's really where we are right now. And I will tell you, I pretty much spent the Christmas holiday crunching that data, which was over 1,000 data points. And what was striking to me was 2 things. 1, the number of times regulatory change was mentioned. And 2, partly probably because of Steve Stewart, there was a lot of discussion about industry and how we do a better job. And so the relationships that PEP has with the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program, it's very symbiotic. PEP does its work. We're here to provide support to PEP. PEP is here to support the work of the NEP. And really all of this boils down to collective impact. Most of you in this room coming to the table and really coming together to protect and continuously improve how we manage our environment. And it looks like, our CCMP is focused on 4 different areas. It's a comprehensive management plan that measures system health, improves environmental management and protection, builds community capacity, whether it's within the business community. How can we monetize some of this stuff so that we can keep it going? How can we improve regulations? How can we engage citizens in being part of the citizen science team? And then in building or expanding our environmental stewards across the Alabama coast by raising awareness and, most importantly, communicating scientifically defensible information. So sometimes you're going to see the National Estuary Program, through its management conference, putting out information to educate the public that may be inconsistent with what you might be hearing in the media. But I will tell you that through all of those people, through all of those scientists, through all of those resource managers, through all of those government entities, what comes out of the NEP is vetted. And so that's really what we're here to talk about today, and that's why I'm laying that platform for Justin to come up here and talk to you about sediment management. Go ahead. And sediment is one of our biggest challenges and opportunities in managing our coastal environment. Among all these blue dots, sediment rises to the top. And what you will see in the next comprehensive conservation management plan is very focused actions related to sediment management and use in the coming years. Go ahead. So I want to talk to you today about how we have gotten to where we have gotten. I started in this program in 2004. Shortly thereafter, we started working with the Corps. One of my charges was to bring together the stakeholders that need to look at doing, frankly, the Dolphin Island Causeway project. So that was back in 2004. We started looking at the Dolphin Island Causeway project, which if any of you have driven down to Dolphin Island, you will now see it in 2024 actually being constructed. Okay, that's a 20-year span of talking, planning, studying, trying to procure funding to address that project and all of the different new normals that came in between, right? So from 2010 to 2015, the Army Corps of Engineers asked the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program to convene an interagency working group made up of resource managers that have their hands in the fire of moving sediment, doing restoration projects, regulating restoration projects. Anybody that had anything to do with getting a project on the ground, let's get them all to the table and let's figure out where we can use this management to the greatest benefit of Mobile Bay. At the time, we identified a couple of projects: the filling of the holes, the filling of Brookley holes, filling the relic shell mounds. There had been a lot of dredging of shell, caused holes in Mobile Bay, let's fill those up. And then there was the talk of creating another marsh island, similar to maybe Gaillard Island, at the top of Mobile Bay for greater habitat. Those projects were identified back in, 2010, between 2010 and 2015. In 2016, to 18, we started, because we had the silver lining, I'm not going to say it's a blessing from the BP oil spill, but it was certainly a silver lining that, thanks to Congressman Bonner and others, we were able to bring back a lot of money to our coastal environment to actually implement some of these projects that just we couldn't move the needle on because of the cost. And so we started working on those projects. So today, what you see is the Dolphin Island Causeway project being constructed. There were more projects added to that. You will see sediment being placed into an island just south of the Theodore Industrial Canal. You will see the island at the top of Mobile Bay being built. And there are others. But I will tell you, and what what Justin is going to talk about this morning is the depth of the trust that has been built through these decades of working together, the depth of the study and science that has gone into the work that we do, particularly as it relates to thin layer placement. Back when I started, thin layer placement, they didn't want to do it. They had tried it. Justin will talk about this. They started taking it offshore. People didn't want to take it offshore. We learned along the way that it's better to keep the sediment as close to where it should be as possible. This is all iterative. It is all, you can go ahead. It is all evolving, if you will. So before I turn this over to Justin, what I'd like to do is show you a couple of projects of how the relationship with the Corps and the NEP and the other resource managers has evolved. This is the tip of Monlouis Island. We started working on this project in 2013. This is not I guess it is a beneficial use project, because basically we worked with the Corps under Susan Reese's direction at the time. She was working at the Corps at the time, and we wanted to create a more resilient tip of Monlouis Island. We were concerned about the tip of Monlouis Island eroding and changing the entire dynamics of the system, certainly at the mouth of Fowl River, which had already been altered before. This project, we probably planned for 2 to 3 years, couldn't figure out where we were going to get the sediment. When we put the project on the table, we're like, oh, this is a no-brainer. Dredge Fowl River, take the dirt, dump it onto the tip of Monlouis Island, plant it, boom, we're done. Wrong. It ended up being that it was too silty at the tip of Monlouis Island. The dredge material was too silty. We got to figure out another way to get dirt to the tip of this island. This is an important project. It was through the Army Corps of Engineers and Nate Lovelace at their operations department that actually went out and said, hey, we have material, we have a permitted site offshore of Monlouis Island. Let's take the material out of that site. That's the quality that you're looking for. We'll put that on the tip. We'll dredge the river because that's what the community wants. And we'll use that material and we'll fill the hole that we just created. And today, this is what it looks like. And it worked. And it was out of the box thinking by everybody at the table. And I am not going to lie to you. There were several times that I would sit in that Corps room that looked like a dungeon and wring my hands and say, I don't want to do this project anymore. I give up. But we didn't. And here you have it today. And that really, I think, solidified, hey, if we work together, we can achieve so much more. So now I'm going to go quickly through. That's Monlouis Island. This is Deer River. This is a new evolution of our relationship with the Corps of Engineers, because if you've ever worked with the Corps of Engineers, you would know that the Corps likes to control all of the risk. The Corps is not controlling all of the risk here. We actually, through several years of negotiation, came to a deal where the Corps allowed the Mobile Bay National Estuary Program and its contractors, Thompson Engineering in this case, did a lot of work on this project, to build the containment, enter into a memorandum of agreement with the Corps, and then have the Corps actually fill the containment that Mobile Bay NEP built. That, I believe, is probably one of the first of its kind, Because typically the Corps would say, no, forget it. We'll we'll do the project, but we're going to do the whole project. We don't want you building the containment. And so that was a back and forth on design with Thompson working with the Corps, making sure it built to the Corps standard. But that was another demonstration of, hey, this relationship could work. We can leverage each other's talents and expertises and abilities. And so right now that project is being filled as we speak with dredging material coming from the turning basin. And the Corps is actually filling the containment structure that we built. And we are working together to do that. Along with that project, there was behind it thin layer placement, which we had not done in the Mobile Bay area, which is basically taking the dredge material and sort of spraying it. There was a picture at the beginning where you saw all this sediment thrown up in the air. It's spraying it in a thin layer across the marsh to give the marsh some lift so that it can be resilient to sea level rise, and it nourishes the marsh. And so we've used that as a demonstration project to study that. This is Dolphin Island Causeway. This is the project I was talking about earlier. From the Deer River project, we then began talking about the Dolphin Island Causeway project and how we needed to protect that roadway. And the idea was, oh, well, you're going to have to truck, I don't know how, 200, 800? How many hundreds of thousands of cubic yards?
50,000 trucks.
50,000 trucks going down Dolphin Island Parkway from Blakely to bring to this site. Okay, full disclosure, I live on Dolphin Island Parkway. I live on Monlowy Island, and it was like, you are not, no, we already have boats. This is going to be a nightmare. And so through going back and forth and pushing, and I have to give kudos to Tina Sanchez at Mobile County because we would not let up. And the Corps finally agreed, okay, we're going to do this like Deer River. We will bring the dirt to you. We will barge it down there. And so these are two examples of new ways that the Corps is working with our local communities to make things happen. Finally, I will talk about Foul River Spit. So this is not necessarily a project, but what it is, it's a demonstration of thinking out of the box, working with the Corps, and what's particular, why I put this slide in here was because we're doing another test case. What's the difference between dry thin layer placement and wet thin layer placement? And so the Corps is now looking at this project, and I want to give a shout out to Jason Kadoulis on this project because he has worked really hard on this project. The Corps is looking at this as a test case for, hey, they've done it, they're demonstrating it, we want to do it. So we need to use this project to learn everything we can so that we can do more of it and get more of the sediment that we're dredging to stay in our system. So with that, go ahead. This interagency task force or work group has been reconvened, and it's federal, state, local agencies, along with the Nature Conservancy, any group that actually does on-the-ground implementation of sediment or of coastal restoration projects that uses public funds. That was sort of our litmus test for who needs to be on the group. It doesn't mean that we're not going to come out and ask people's opinions or get input or consult with other engineering firms, particularly those that are working on these projects. It doesn't mean that we're not listening to the community, but when you're trying to implement these levels of complexity projects, it requires knowledge to be at the table. And that's what this group is doing, and they are meeting on a monthly basis right now. Go ahead. So really, what it comes down to with the work group is we need to collaborate and coordinate, we need to leverage, and we need to identify projects because we have a lot of sediment that we got to figure out something to do with. One of the thoughts for the future, there's a couple of things that have been thrown around for the future, and this might be of interest to PEP. Renourishment of marshes over time. There's been a lot of money on restore projects spent to restore these marshes. We also know that sea level rise is just going to come on in and drown them. And so how do we create a strategy that uses this dredge material, times it, so that we can renourish these marshes as sea levels rise so we can sustain their health over time? That's one of the things we're talking about. How to keep material working in the bay, how to do a better job of communicating that thin layer placement is actually a beneficial use because of those same very reasons. Sea levels are rising. We have to maintain a certain elevation for our seagrasses to thrive, and other reasons. It's not killing the benthic community. The benthic community does respond. We know that. And then there are storage islands along the bay as we do this shoreline management planning that we're working on right now for Mobile County. Is there an opportunity for us to do something like we did on Deer River, or the Deer River Restoration Project along Mobile Bay, where it becomes these containment areas to put the fill, and then that fill is available for use maybe closer to shore? It's another thing that we're looking at. And then finally, which I think is the most exciting, mostly because I learned how to do an AI graphic, which I'm pretty impressed with myself on, but 3D printing of reefs and using those reefs, again, to tamp down some of that wave energy and to help us sustain the shorelines or stabilize the shorelines along Mobile Bay. So with that said, really, the continuous improvement of our shorelines and the continuous management of our sediment boils down to a couple of things. One, it's iterative. Two, it's evolving. But most importantly, it cannot happen with trust, and it cannot happen without trust, science, and perseverance, and that is really the most important thing. We have been working on this for over a decade, almost 2 decades now, and today I am here to introduce Justin McDonald, who has been a key part of all of this, because part of it requires thinking outside of the box and pushing against the way things have always been done, and that's where we are today. So Justin, with that, I leave it to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Roberta. I appreciate you guys having me here today to represent the Corps of Engineers to kind of get our side of the story out. I know you've heard a lot in the media about the dredging, the deepening of the Mobile Harbor Channel, and I think there's a lot of confusion out there between the deepening of the channel and the new work that's going on, and then our routine maintenance practices. So hopefully my goal today is when I walk away from here that everyone understands the difference in the two and all of the work and science that went into it. Roberta did a great job of kind of laying the groundwork, and hopefully what you took away from her talk was there's been a lot of collaboration over the years and a lot of iterative conversations and a lot of science collectively to support what we do every day. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the history of the Mobile Harbor project. I'll talk about some of the environmental compliance efforts, and then I'll actually get into the details of the deepening and widening project, what the status of it is, where we're placing the material, how we're using it beneficially, how much we're hauling to the ocean, etc. And then I'll talk about how we maintain and operate the channel every day. We literally are dredging Mobile Harbor pretty much 365 days a year somewhere in the system. And then I'll briefly hit on some of the monitoring that we do, just to give you the perspective of we're not just out there letting the contractor run loose and do whatever he or she wants to do. All right, so the history. We've been dredging Mobile Harbor for almost 200 years, way back into the 1800s. And it's evolved over time as obviously ships and vessels that call to port have become larger. The channel has been deepened and widened numerous times. I'll provide all of these slides to you guys to have for reference. I'm not going to read through all this, but I try to highlight a couple things on here. One important part was the channel today, prior to us completing the deepening project that's ongoing, it's at 45 feet in the bay, 47 feet on the entrance coming from the Gulf into the bay, and then 40 feet in the river. It's depth limited in the river due to the tunnel. Okay, so the deepening project, as we're working it today, is going to support the lower end of the harbor, essentially the container terminal, which is what's going to draw more water, these larger ships that are coming through the new Panama Canal system. So we will be at 50 feet deep, which will be the deepest port in the Gulf. That's a huge economic advantage to this region. So when the project was deepened to its current depth at 45 in the 80s, there was a lot of concern, like today, or the talk you've heard today, about placing the material in the bay. And so what Congress did in 1986, in the Water Resource Development Act of 1986, they literally required that all dredge material be hauled to the ocean. So we, from 1986, essentially until 2012, we're hauling the bulk of that material to the ocean. Well, in 1996, Congress came back and reversed that and said, hey, between 86 and 96, our community of practice has evolved over the years, and you start to think about regional sediment management, and you start to think about terms, you'll hear people talk about engineering with nature and beneficial use. Basically, the concept there is to keep the material in the system and let nature do what nature would do had we not been there, okay? And so that's our goal. So in '96, Congress reversed that and said, well, you can put material back in Mobile Bay if it's for beneficial purposes, that's not harmful to the environment. So essentially between '96 and then the timeline Roberta laid out earlier, we spent a lot of time thinking about how do we do this. We had two actions between '96 and 2012 where we placed material in the bay, both after hurricanes, one after Hurricane George and one after Hurricane Katrina. But outside of that, all the material was hauled to the ocean. So these are those kind of guiding principles that I talked about a minute ago. I just want you to know these terms and be familiar with them, because these aren't, this isn't just some fly-by-night thing we're talking about. As Roberta alluded to, we have been working in this world collectively as a community of science for a long time. So I'm going to kind of now zone in on the 2009-2010 time frame where Roberta highlighted earlier. Go back a slide, please. Yeah, thank you. This was when the interagency working group was convened, and the focus of that group was, all right, we realized that it's not a good thing to haul all this sediment out of the system. I always kind of relate it to your 401k, right? If you go start borrowing from your 401k when you're 30 years old, that money's not going to be there later in life when you need it. There's a sediment budget out there. There's sediment that comes in the system, there's sediment that leaves the system, and we are very cognizant of trying to maintain that sediment in the system. The sediment that ends up in the channel, we don't create. It doesn't come out of thin air. All right, this is sediment that is coming down our river systems and moving throughout our system, and we believe it is the best thing to do to try to sustain and keep that material in the system to allow the bay to do what it would do had we not been around. So there was a lot of work that went in starting in 2009 with the convening of the interagency working group, and the focus was, all right, we need to do the science to support keeping material in the bay. Is it harming our benthic communities? When we place material on a site, all those little microorganisms that live in the mud, how long does it take for those to recolonize? Where is that material going? What are the impacts to water quality, both short-term and long-term? Is this material moving? Is it covering up seagrass beds? Is it covering up oysters? Are we impacting wetlands? So all of that work started with the interagency working group. Between 2009 and 2014, we did a big pilot study where we placed material out there using thin layer placement. We monitored that. We did benthic sampling. We did testing to look at the erodibility of that material. We did a sediment budget. Ultimately resulted in water quality certification and coastal zone consistency supporting thin layer placement in 2014. So from 2014 to today, we place material in the bay for maintenance practices using a combination of thin layer placement, which is disposing of the material in depths of thicknesses of no greater than 12 feet, but ideally 12 inches, but ideally 6 inches, okay? And then we alternate that placement on a 4 to 6 year cycle. So if we place material here today, we're not gonna place it there again for at least 4 years. And we do that. We also haul material offshore. We still haul about 40% of our material to the ocean. And that's a function of the dredging equipment and availability. There's an extreme limitation on hopper dredges. I'm not sure how many folks in here are familiar with the different types of dredges, but really when we're talking maintenance dredging, we're talking either a hopper dredge, which is an ocean-going vessel that has drag arms. It sucks the material into the hull and then it sails wherever it's gone and it literally dumps it out of the bottom. Very inefficient operation, particularly in Mobile Bay, because you're hauling predominantly water 35 plus miles one way to go dump it, and then sail back and get another load and go dump it. And there's a limited availability of that fleet in the nation. But we still do use that to keep the channel open. We kind of have to throw all the tools that we have at our expense at this. And so we do about 60% of our material that we dispose in the bay, and about 40% gets hauled offshore. Then in 2015, the port came to us and wanted to deepen the channel. So there was a lot of science that went into that. In this slide here, I just want to show you, I'm not going to obviously talk through all these analyses, but I'm trying to get the point across that you've heard terms like experimental science, you've heard, experimental mud dumping, all of that stuff. There's been a ton of work that has gone into this over the years, a ton of science, collaborative science with several folks in this room to ultimately get to where we are today. Next slide. All right, so we are fully environmentally compliant. I want to make that point clear. We follow all federal and state laws and regulations. When we were approached by the port in 2015 to deepen the channel. We did an extensive study, 4-year study. It was about $8 million to look at the environmental effects of deepening that channel 5 feet. So we developed three-dimensional water quality modeling, sediment transport modeling, hydrodynamic modeling to look at how we're going to change the way water moves through the system. When you physically change the channel dimension, you're absolutely going to change all of those processes. There's no way to not change it, right? You're going to change water quality. You're going to change hydrodynamics. You're going to change the way sediment moves. The key is, is that change significant, and is it within the tolerable thresholds of all the sensitive species and habitats that are out there? That was our charge. We wanted to make decisions that were founded in good science. All of this has been published. So we were concerned about wetlands, SAVs, submerged aquatic vegetation, oysters, the fisheries, and the benthic community. So if you care to read about that, there's a link there. That was an environmental impact statement we created. It went through numerous rounds of public and agency review. It went through rounds of external peer review. All of that was ultimately culminated with a signing of a chief's report and a submission to Congress in 2019. And it's all available on our website for folks to look at. You could, if you're really bored at night and you want to fall asleep, open it up and read it. A lot of scientific deep dive there. But I just want to reiterate that we are fully compliant. We follow all federal and state laws and regulations, and we monitor every dredging action every day out there to ensure that we are compliant with the requirements imposed upon us. Next slide. All right, so now I'm going to actually talk about the project itself. And I know you guys are supposed to get out of here at 8, so I'll try to be as brief as I can. There's really two components. There's the deepening of the channel, and then there's the maintenance of the channel. So this is the overview of the deepening project. It was 6 phases, which we had to break one of the phases into 2. We intended to work from south to north. 3 of the phases are complete, 3 are ongoing. We will be complete, hopefully, and open for business in June. The material is predominantly being hauled to the ocean. We are beneficially using some of the material at different locations. Roberta showed you the pictures of the Dauphin Island Causeway and Deer River. That's a total of about 1 million cubic yards going to those 2 sites combined. It's coming out of the turning basin across from APM terminal, the container terminal. We placed about a little under 5 million cubic yards in an area we call the relic shell sites. When the whole the stories got kind of ginned up back in the summer from the Baykeeper, that was all about we were placing material in those sites. So those are the holes that Radcliffe mined for 40 years from the 40s to the 80s for shell that we were using for construction-based materials, right? There were these deep holes in the bay that over time filled in with this kind of unconsolidated fluid mud. The resource agencies actually came to us during the study and said, hey, could you fill those holes up, because it's a very unproductive part of the bay. We didn't say that it was going to increase water quality, improve water quality. We didn't make any of those claims. We were doing it at the request of the environmental agencies, and the goal was to try to improve the bottom conditions with the hopes that you would see improved benthic conditions and improved water quality. That part of the project is complete. What's remaining to construct on the project, we are working phase 2, which is down in the entrance down here. We had to delay that phase due to some pipeline conflicts, which we ultimately resolved. And then we're working the phase 6, which is in the all the way in the northern part of the bay, right there in the turning, where we're modifying the turning basin across from APM terminal. So this has been a really good project. It is on schedule and it is under budget, knock on wood, which is hard to do in today's climate. Next slide. This is just a schedule showing kind of where we're at. Again, I'm going to provide these slides to you so you'll have them for reference. Next slide. All right, so this is really kind of the meat of the beneficial use part that we talked about. I've already hit on these. What I want to point out in this slide here, all these boxes you see along the channel, that's where we dispose of our maintenance material. Okay, they're 2,500 feet off the channel, and we place them there in thin lifts. So this gives you an overview kind of the whole project in the beneficial use locations. Roberta talked about the Deer River and Dauphin Island Causeway. I just talked about the relic shell sites, which are these areas up here, these kind of brown boxes with that purple shaded area around it. And then the sand island beneficial use area. The only sand that we dredge out of this system is down here at the entrance. When it comes off the Fort Morgan Peninsula, it essentially does a 90-degree turn because of the strong tidal currents. It ends up on the channel about the Sand Island Lighthouse and south. We literally dredge it and we place it on the other side of the channel so it can continue to move towards Dauphin Island. So all of that sand that we dredge, we pass it down the system towards Dauphin Island. We are going to dredge about 2.5 million cubic yards of that for the deepening. That is sand, and it will be placed, if you're familiar with the area where Pelican Island merged to Dauphin Island, some people call it Sand Island, The tip of Pelican Island, the southeastern tip, we will be expanding that out as part of this project. Next slide. And so this is just some renderings of the Dauphin Island Causeway project that we've already talked about. All right, so our O&M practices. I alluded to earlier the 2014 Environmental Assessment and Statement of Findings that allowed us to start to implement thin layer placement in Mobile Bay. We dredge about 4 million cubic yards of material a year out of the bay, 4 to 4.5 million cubic yards of material. It's a lot of material. So when you hear the baykeeper talk about, well, we want to see all that material beneficially used. To put it into perspective, we dredge 4 million yards of material out of that channel every year, out of the bay part of the channel. To do the Dauphin Island Causeway and Deer River project, which are big restoration projects, 1 million cubic yards, a quarter of what we dredge annually. So I mean, just put that into scale. You know, that's the volume of material we're dealing with on an annual basis, and we have to throw everything we have in the toolbox at it to do thin layer placement, to keep it in the system, and some of it we do haul offshore. The sites that we place it in are shown there, those sites along the channel. We rotate those on a 4 to 6 year cycle, and the intent of that is to allow that site to recover. We have shown through our work that the benthics recover quite quickly. It doesn't take anywhere close to 4 to 6 years, but we do stagger that to try to allow those sites to recover after we place it there. And we still maintain the ability to haul it to the ocean. Next slide. Go to the next one. So I wanted to show you a little bit of, you know, we don't just go out there and place material and not pay attention to what's going on. We did extensive monitoring prior to construction of the project. This is just a shot that shows you those relic shell sites. We did benthic sampling pre-sampling. We're doing monitoring during and after construction. There's water quality stations out there. We did discrete water quality monitoring out there while the activities were going on. We utilized the ADEM water quality stations that are out there to constantly monitor our water quality. You've probably heard something about increased turbidity in the bay because of our dredging activities. Our requirement is we cannot exceed 50 NTUs above ambient when we're dredging. We take a background sample, we take turbidity measurements where we're dredging, we take turbidity measurements where we're placing the material. If we exceed 50 NTU above the background, we shut down. We monitor that all the time. So Mobile Bay is a mud bottom system. It's fed by tremendous sediment coming out of the rivers. Kind of the argument when people come at me with that, I say, hey, you know, you go in Fowl River, Dog River, Fish River, how's the turbidity look in those systems? You know how often we dredge those? Yeah, we don't. Very, very rarely. All right. So Mobile Bay and the systems that feed it are highly, highly variable in turbidity. Go look at an aerial photo or satellite photo after a big rain event and see what it looks like. So I think that's important for people to understand the natural variability of a system when you go into these conversations. These habitats and species that are in these systems are very resilient and tolerant to these massive changes in turbidity because we see them naturally from all the storm and flood activities we get here. Next slide. This is just trying to show you guys, you know, we monitor our dredging every day. We're always looking at before and after surveys of where we dig from and where we place. This is actually post-construction surveys. That bottom plot at the relic shell site, the criteria there was that we couldn't exceed a 3-foot lift. This is virgin cut material. It's not flowable maintenance material, so it's not thin layer placement in that site. We couldn't exceed a 3-foot lift. We were targeting a 1.5-foot lift. So you can see we hit that very, very well. The blue line on the bottom was the precondition. The red line is the survey after the dredge contractor placed the material there. And then that green line is the 1.5 foot, and the black line on top is the 3 foot. The point I'm making here is we track this very closely every day. Next slide. We have real-time tracking on all the dredges. I can see when they're digging, where they're digging, how they're digging, what their production is, where they're sailing, what their depths are, where the cutter head is, where the drag arms are. We can see this all the time through a program we have called the Dredge Quality Management Program, and it's on every dredge that operates on one of our projects. So we are constantly watching what these contractors are doing. I have a whole staff of people that's their job. Project engineers out in the field, QA reps, quality assurance reps that are working with the contractor to ensure that that contractor is following the contract and complying with all applicable environmental laws and regulations. All right, so I'll try to be quick there because I know we're a little behind schedule. Be glad to entertain any questions. We'll provide all this information to you guys. There's links on all that to the technical references if you want to read it. Appreciate you having us. Any questions, I'll be glad to take them now. It's about twice as much to take it offshore than to place it in the bay. So I've heard that too. You know, it's more cost effective to haul it to the ocean. No, it's about twice. We can put it in the bay. Thin layer placement, probably $5 a cubic yard-ish. Hauling offshore is probably double that. The relic, to your point, Mike, the relic shell site, though, that we did where we placed the new work material at the request of the agencies, that was twice as much to put it there than to haul it offshore because of the pumping distance and because of some of the nuances with the material. So that actually cost us more.
Quick question, Justin. How will this affect the west end of Dolphin Island and the beach restoration? You alluded a little bit to that.
Yeah, so we are required, due to previous litigation between the town and the Corps back in the early 2000s, that ultimately was settled. Every grain of sand that we dredge out of the entrance channel, we put in what's called the Sand Island Beneficial Use Area, so that material can continue to move towards Dolphin Island. We actively monitor that site multiple times a year. We work with other folks in the area who are knowledgeable of that system and processes to make sure that where we place material is in the right place and can continue to move downdrift to the island.
Just have a question. There's obviously a lot of science that goes into the environmental impact statement. Could you speak to a little bit about how long that takes to put one of those together, and a little bit about the public comment period?
Yeah.
And whether, you know, during this project you guys received comments that match up with some of the latest media reports?
Yeah, so it's a very rigorous process doing an environmental impact statement. That one took us 4 years. We spent $7.9 million from start to finish. I was the lead engineer on that project when we were going through the environmental impact statement. And one of the things that we pushed really hard for, you know, if you look around the region, look at what takes Savannah Harbor, for instance. You've maybe seen that in the media. Well, Savannah's spending hundreds of millions of dollars on dissolved oxygen mitigation. Fair point. When we started this project, we wanted every decision that was made, because this is taxpayer dollars we're spending, we wanted them to be founded in science. We were not trying to mitigate. We just wanted to make sure that whatever happened, you know, whatever the changes were and whatever the impacts from the project were going to be, that we were in a very scientifically defensible position. So we spent millions of dollars developing three-dimensional water quality models, hydrodynamic models to look at the way, you know, water moves through the system, and sediment transport models. We brought in PhD experts from our research lab in Vicksburg, ERDIC, as well as others from the USGS to characterize the conditions of the bay. What are the existing conditions of the wetlands, of the seagrasses, of the oysters, of the fisheries, of the benthic community? And how tolerant are those species and habitats to changes in salinity, changes in dissolved oxygen, changes in sediment transport? All of that is very, very well documented in the thousands of pages of technical information that came with the EIS. That went out for public review twice, right, at 2 different points. The draft report and the final report. It went through an independent external peer review, which is outside of the Corps of Engineers. It went through rigorous external peer review within the Corps of Engineers. Everything that we do is reviewed by 2 external teams within the Corps that aren't part of the project. So I can stand up here and tell you, you know, very confidently, because I lived it for those 4 years, that we went through a very, very rigorous process to ensure that we were in sound science supporting the project and the potential impacts of the project.
Any other questions? Well, Justin and Roberta, thank you so much. I mean, I think this was just a fantastic presentation, and we appreciate so much the Corps and the NEP, and also our ability to work with you all. So thank you. In your honor to say thank you, we're going to be making a donation to the Eagle Reef Project to install a reef at a public access point in Mobile Bay.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, I hope you all have a great day, and we'll be in touch.